Welcome to Real Talk with Sarah. I'm your host, Sarah Roberts, and in this show, we're going within to talk about ways we can care for our mental health. When we think about ourselves and our health, we can tend to create a false division between our mental and our physical health. When we can realize that our brains are physical and our bodies affect how we feel mentally and emotionally, then we can begin to remove the stigma around mental illness. If you or someone you love struggles with depression or anxiety, or if you're seeking ways to feel better in your life, then you won't want to miss this episode. I've got occupational therapist Elizabeth Eacrett with me to share the difference between mental health and mental illness and to teach us how OTs work with their clients to create a new normal. And later, I've got naturopathic Dr. Tanya Manikkam with me to share how our hormones can play a huge role in helping us to feel our best. So let's do this. Episode 3 of Real Talk with Sarah starts right now. Well, until I learned about my first guest, I'd assumed that occupational therapy was all about helping people return to work after a physical injury. I'm so happy a friend of mine introduced me to this woman because we are all going to learn a lot from this conversation. Welcome, Elizabeth Eacrett.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on because, as you know, we've been talking a lot before we decided to do the show together, and I really didn't understand what an occupational therapist really did. And I'm excited to ask you that question. What do you do and how do you do your work?
Yeah, so it is a common assumption that a lot of people think that occupational therapy is all about return to work.
Yeah.
And while that is part of what a lot of us do, it doesn't define our profession and what it is, what are the many things that we do. So the occupational part of occupational therapy really refers to the daily activities that someone may need to do or want to do or are expected to do in their life. So maintaining a household, going grocery shopping, looking after the family, taking the dog for a walk. So as occupational therapists, we work with individuals with chronic health conditions, injuries, illnesses, to resume that participation in activities that are the most meaningful and important for them to be able to do.
All right, so who gets in touch with you and how do they get in touch with you if they're having issues getting themselves back into their lives?
Absolutely. So I work in private practice in the community, and so I receive referrals from individuals who may have just sought me out on their own. I used to work in a hospital setting in a day treatment program and as well in an inpatient unit. So there are occupational therapists who work in hospitals, in communities, some clinics as well.
Okay, so if I'm somebody, and so I've had either a physical injury, let's kind of get into mental health. What's going on if somebody's struggling with a mental illness and how do they get in touch with you and what does that look like when it comes to treating them?
Yeah, so exactly. In my private practice, I work a lot with veterans, and it's interesting that occupational therapy as a profession first started about 100 years ago after World War I, helping veterans to rehabilitate and reacclimatize back into civilian life. So I happen to be working with veterans in my current practice in the community, and so those referrals come through Veterans Affairs, but anyone can seek me out. Occupational therapists approach mental health from a very holistic point of view. We look at all of the factors that are playing a role in making life challenging. So for someone who may be struggling with office paperwork, for example, or paying bills, I look at how someone's pain, low energy, self-esteem, negative thinking patterns, fatigue, all of those things play a role in making those daily life activities a real challenge.
So does this typically come after an incident? Like I'm assuming when you were talking about after the veterans,
Yeah.
So we're talking PTSD in that case?
Absolutely. PTSD, depression, anxiety, absolutely. And also physical injuries, chronic pain, cognitive injuries. So we're looking at the whole person, but we're really using activity as a means of promoting good mental health and recovery from mental illness, in my role specifically. There are OTs who do lots of different things, working in schools, hospitals, rehabilitation clinics. So OT as a profession, or occupational therapy, is very broad and diverse.
So when you're working with somebody, let's say that they do have depression or anxiety, are they coming to you knowing that that is a diagnosis, or are they questioning it and just reaching out to say, I just need some help here?
Most often, they know that they have this diagnosis and they have these functional challenges, but some of my clients are wanting help with return to work and maybe struggling with something like anxiety and want strategies for helping them getting back to work and strategies for managing that anxiety once they are back. Absolutely. So it's a little bit of both.
So let's get into it. How do you define anxiety and how do you define depression?
So maybe we'll start with depression.
Sure.
So depression, or major depressive disorder, is a medical illness that impacts the brain and body. So someone's thoughts, moods, thinking patterns, behaviors. And it's more than sadness. So sadness is a normal human emotion that all people feel and is very much an appropriate emotion to feel when life's challenges come up, such as divorce or a breakup or the death of a loved one.
Yes, and I think so many of us are so reluctant to feel those negative feelings that we want to go and talk to our doctor and say, I don't want to feel these feelings, and is there a pill you can give me to feel better? I think that's such a common way of approaching it.
And I do think that people strive for, well, I should be feeling positive emotion, I should be feeling happy, and I can't feel sad, and I can't feel these negative emotions. Well, to feel is to be human, and the key is to cope well when we are experiencing those strong emotions. So depression, the sadness doesn't just go away unless treated. So that may be, some of the difference that we see with depression. And the depression comes with a whole range of symptoms and really does impact someone's ability to function and their relationships.
So it's not just feeling sad.
No, absolutely. So we see symptoms such as a physical slowing down. We see changes in sleeping patterns, changes in appetite, irritable mood, repetitive negative thinking, impaired memory, difficulties with concentration, fatigue, body pain. So there are a whole range of really a lot of physical symptoms that do need to be there in order for there to be a diagnosis. A really important symptom to realize is that people lose pleasure from activity again. So that's where that lack of motivation and reducing activity altogether comes. We also see a lot of social isolation with depression. So it becomes very difficult to get out of the house to begin with. And then on top of that, people are reporting that it takes so much energy to pretend that they're doing okay, when in fact they're struggling tremendously. And that becomes very difficult, and people are really worried about being a burden on others or bringing other people down, and which feeds further into that social isolation.
So when we're feeling these ways, so we're losing our appetite, we're feeling lethargic, we're not able to get out of the house, all of those things that you mentioned, is that the time to go to our doctor or our naturopathic doctor and really try to figure out what's going on, that we could take something to help us feel better? Or is it better to start with some other strategies, like I know that you're going to share with us, as far as moving and getting out? Like, what would be sort of, is it different for everybody?
Yeah, I would say that it's a very difficult, thing that there's, one path that someone should take. Certainly discussing symptoms, recording symptoms in a diary, taking note of how your body, your personality, thoughts, moods are changing, and bringing that to a family doctor. But also we know that exercise, diet, meditation are incredibly important protective activities that can really help. So it's difficult for me to answer in terms of, everyone is an individual, everyone has a history and a biological predisposition, but certainly talking to a family doctor, considering talking to a therapist could be a good option.
And what if we are the loved ones of someone that we're seeing their behavior change? We're noticing changes and the person affected isn't even opening up about that. What can be done there?
Yeah, so if we're noticing changes in personality, if we're noticing someone withdrawing, if we're noticing someone is not leaving the house or perhaps is on the computer a lot, there may be a bunch of different changes happening. We can reach out and ask, what is going on and what do you need from me? We need to listen genuinely, refraining from giving lots of advice. Oh, wait, maybe you should try this. Maybe you should start exercising. If people could, they likely would be doing some of those things. I think that we need to have a list. We need to listen and genuinely understand where someone is at, and perhaps bring up the topic of, let's consider some options for getting some help.
Definitely. So let's move on to anxiety. I was just talking with a young girl tonight that was telling me, oh yeah, I'm on anti-anxiety medication. And recently I talked with my dentist and they said they always have to find out what medications people are on before treating them. And they can't believe the number of young people that are taking anti-anxiety medication. What is going on there? Tell us what the symptoms are and how we can maybe manage it without necessarily going to the doctor and taking medication.
So anxiety disorders, there are many different types of anxiety disorders: generalized anxiety disorder, phobias, obsessive compulsive disorder, and there are others. They all have their own symptoms and presentation and the way that they impact people. Anxiety disorders is different than feeling anxious. So feeling anxious, again, is a normal human emotion that all people experience. For example, going for a job interview or being a new student in a new school. We actually don't want to not feel anxious. It serves a role and a purpose in our life.
Right.
An anxiety disorder comes with excessive worry that is intrusive and persistent, so that that worry really impacts someone's ability to function, their relationships. So some of the symptoms of an anxiety disorder, again, that excessive worry, impaired concentration, restlessness, muscle tension, reduced sleeping patterns. So there are lots of different symptoms, again, different symptoms and may impact people differently.
And panic attacks, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. That can be, there are panic disorders, and individuals with anxiety can have panic attacks, absolutely, which can be very, very frightening for people.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, I've heard that it makes people feel like they're having a heart attack.
Yeah,
so this
absolutely.
Is, when we're talking about these kinds of symptoms, this is the kind of anxiety that you need to get help with. At the same time, there is normal anxiety and that we just need to feel and go through, because that's a part of the human experience.
Absolutely. Anxiety actually helps us to prepare and perform and get away when there is a real threat. So, but anxiety disorders, they can be very intrusive and impact people's functioning in a major way. For example, you and I might be concerned about touching door handles and getting rid of germs because we don't want to get sick. Someone with an anxiety disorder, that worry may be so intense that it may prevent them from leaving the house altogether.
Wow. And so you work with people where they are.
Absolutely.
And so tell us how that looks when you will work with people. What kinds of I know that you and I chatted before the show, and you were saying that you even will go to their home, because it's a different story when people come to the office and can present in whatever way, but when you go to their environment, it's harder for them to,
yeah,
to
so
hide.
Being an in-home occupational therapist, I see how someone is truly managing and functioning. And so someone with anxiety, we might work on a variety of different things. A big part of what we work on is coping strategies. So I'm not just telling someone that they should work on relaxation and breathing techniques. We're actually practicing those techniques right in the session.
Right.
We're actually going for a walk right in the session together to relieve body tension, mental tension, give a boost to energy levels. So we're actually doing a lot of the strategies that I recommend together right in our sessions. I'm trained in cognitive behavioral therapy as well. So a CBT, there's a strong CBT component to what I do with my clients when we're working on anxiety, challenging anxious thinking patterns. So there's a lot of different things that I do with my clients, and a lot of it is practical, hands-on, realistic goal setting. And because I work in the home with clients, those strategies and skills that we work on for managing their day-to-day activities and function really fit nicely into their lifestyle, because I'm seeing how their lifestyle is, because I'm working with them right in their home.
Yeah, it's a fascinating approach. I really respect it. I think it seems like it works really well that way. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit, just talking about mental health and mental illness. I feel like a lot of people are using those terms interchangeably, and we shouldn't be. So I want you to talk to those points.
Yeah, so mental health and mental illness do kind of mean different things. So mental health refers to our emotional well-being, and everyone has a level of mental health, and everyone will have challenges with their mental health from time to time in life. Not everyone will be diagnosed with a mental illness. So a mental illness is a medical illness that impacts someone's thoughts, behavior, mood, and can be quite complex. So some more examples of mental illnesses: post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. We mentioned anxiety and depression, and they all have their own set of symptoms associated with them, ranging from mild to severe, and they impact everyone very differently. So mental health, in order to have good mental health, we need to be aware of our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, have a healthy relationship with ourselves and others, do the things that are most meaningful for us to be able to do, and cope well in the face of life's challenges and stresses, no matter if someone has a diagnosis of a mental illness or not.
Wow, that's an excellent way of talking about it, that whether or not we have that illness or not, there are ways that we can all cope and work with what we've got, right? So depending on how we're all feeling, there are strategies that we can all employ. And so, yeah, I think it's amazing what you do. So we have to go to a break, but after the break, Elizabeth is going to offer up her top tips on improving our mental health. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I've got occupational therapist Elizabeth Eacrett sharing her top 5 tips to improving our mental health. All right, Elizabeth, let's do this together. What's the #1 top tip that you have for us?
So just before I begin, I really want to say that my top 5 tips are not kind of cure all, do these 5 things and you'll be all set to go. That would be nice, right? My top 5 tips are really approaches and strategies on how to bring some of these important things like diet and exercise and meditation into our life. These tips are about how to get started from an OT perspective, occupational therapy perspective.
I love it. Great.
So my first tip is all about starting small. So when a task is in front of us and it feels too large, we get overwhelmed and we don't do it. So we
and
need.
you're talking everybody. Like this
Absolutely.
is all of us that have this as an issue.
Everybody.
Because procrastination is not just for people with mental health issues, for mental illness. We're talking everybody can improve their mental health from this perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All of my tips are applicable to everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, so starting small, we need to break larger tasks down into smaller, more manageable tasks. So for example, if we have to clean the whole house, that idea is overwhelming. And where do I begin? So we need to break that down. Okay, start with one room and just do one room the first day. Or we can break it down to the most important task. Priority number one, swish out the toilets. So, or if we look at a just 5 minutes approach, if I just do 5 minutes, that's not so bad.
It kind of makes me think of, in my own experience, I didn't use AA as my recovery model, but the tenet of Alcoholics Anonymous is about one day at a time. And it's when you can take it in those tiny bite-sized pieces, it can be more doable. It can feel more doable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
So second tip,
Yeah.
plan ahead. So when we don't have a plan, we're more likely to not have as much direction, and stress can come upon us. So I'm talking about planning our day. We need to have a little bit of an outline of a few activities that we can use to structure our day. So for example, we can go for a little walk in the morning, go get the mail in the afternoon, have a cup of tea in the evening. We need to have an outline of what our day might look like.
So are you suggesting we write it down?
Absolutely, that is the most important part of it. Get a brightly colored sticky note, write that plan down, and when you accomplish those tasks, strike them out, cross them off for a little bit of a sense of accomplishment. Really important for motivation and getting moving.
All right. Tip number 3.
Healthy routines. So self-care often goes to the wayside when we're struggling with mental health and mental illness. We need to identify what it is in terms of self-care that we need to keep doing on a daily basis to keep us as well as possible. So again, writing down a daily routine for our self-care. Brush teeth in the morning. Make sure I get dressed, take my medications or supplements, make sure I have lunch. So an outline for the day that includes our most important self-care tasks. Really, really important. Helps us with emotional well-being, physical health. Really, really important to focus on self-care.
And I think like what you said before about being able to check off things that we've done, it really does add to a sense of accomplishment, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And success breeds success.
Absolutely. And when we start to feel some of the changes, that kickstarts the recovery process, and that helps clients with a sense of hope. Absolutely.
And that sense of hope, that's got to be everything, right? When we're really in a dark place.
Yeah. And we need to focus on the little things, the little progress, things that are going well for us, and build on from there. Yeah, build up some momentum.
All right. 4th tip.
So 4th tip is making it meaningful.
What do you mean by that?
So the things that we do in a day-to-day basis, we often focus on, doing the household chores, doing things for other people. Well, what about the activities that we need to do that are meaningful to us, that are important to us, that affirm our self-identity, that bring us self-esteem? So we need to add in some of those activities that are meaningful. So my suggestion is to start with looking at what is it that I value? Is it spirituality? Is it my friends and family? Is it being in nature? Is it animals? And start there. So start with an activity that sparks a bit of interest. Taking the dog for a walk on a brand new nature trail that I've never tried to see the fall colors, for example. So when we start doing from a place of what we value and what is most meaningful and important to us, as occupational therapists, we see this as an opportunity to expand health and promote mental health. So we use activity in terms of a recovery tool.
Wow, it's such a unique approach. It's such a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know how much time we have left, but we've got to get to your 5th tip. What's number 5?
So be gentle. It is very challenging to manage mental illness. And we will have good days and bad days. We need to have a compassionate approach with ourselves. You know, if we have a bad day and don't get to those things on that list that we planned for ourselves, don't judge yourself. Move on, make a new plan for tomorrow, and continue on. That self-compassion is a skill that we can all work on.
Definitely a skill that we can all work on. And I think you're so right about being compassionate. We can all beat ourselves up for all of the things that we didn't do. And yet, if we can look at, Tony Greco was on last week showing, you know, sort of that win list and loss list. And that can be a really good way, too, to see how, you know, to see where we are. All right. Well,
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for being with me. I think we all learned a lot from this conversation. I know I sure did. After the break, I'll have Dr. Tanya Manikkam here to teach us how our hormones affect our mental health. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk with Sarah. If you're just joining us, we are talking about mental health on this show. And I think a lot of us don't understand the role our hormones play in general, as well as specifically to our mental health. So I've asked Dr. Tanya Manikkam to be here with me to help us to put it all together. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. You're just such a treat to be with. I just saw you earlier this week, and I can't get enough of you. So we've been talking a lot about hormones, the two of us, and I was saying to you, I feel like I'm somebody that knows a fair bit about my health, and yet when it comes to hormones, I really don't know nearly what I think I should know. And so I really wanted you to come on and really talk about how our hormones affect our mental health. But let's start with sort of the endocrine system in general and how it relates to the nervous system.
Yeah, so basically there's actually three systems, really the big systems in us. So there's the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. And to be honest, they all interact with each other.
Okay.
So the endocrine system is our hormones, right? And there's so many hormones. There's some I'm convinced we don't even know we have yet, you know?
Wow.
But there are a good 70 to 80 that we're able to measure. One class of these hormones is called the steroid hormones. And those ones,
the what
the
hormone?
steroid hormones.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the one that, you know, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all those hormones come from. They initially come from cholesterol, actually. So you need cholesterol to make these hormones, right?
And so is this cholesterol that we're eating from food?
Yeah, exactly.
Or
yeah.
is it the cholesterol that we make in our body?
Both, right?
Okay.
Exactly, both. So from cholesterol, then you get something called pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is this master hormone. And from pregnenolone, you're going to make whatever hormone your body needs. So from estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, that kind of stuff.
So there's this mother hormone that determines what other hormones we need more of.
Well, it's the master hormone from where the other hormones get made from. Yeah.
Okay, because
So
I think I thought that the thyroid gland produced thyroid hormones.
Yeah. So the thyroid hormones are actually part of the amino acid hormones. It's a bit different, actually, than the steroid hormones. Oh, it's super complicated. It really, really is.
And this is why we need a naturopathic doctor to explain it to us. Okay, keep going.
So from pregnenolone, then you'll make your steroid hormones. And the steroid hormones are extremely linked to mood. So from depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff. If you don't have enough of these hormones, you are going to be more at risk of having depression, anxiety disorders, those kinds of things. As we age, these are the hormones that actually diminish in us as well.
In all people?
All people, yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
So for us women, right, we go through menopause. So menopause, we lose our estrogen completely, our progesterone completely, our testosterone completely. We lose another hormone called DHEA completely, right? So all these hormones, they disappear. Progesterone helps us women stay calm, helps us deal with stress, helps us with sleep, especially the staying asleep.
Yes.
So as we're getting a bit older, so usually, to be honest, progesterone is the first hormone to go down.
Yep.
For some women, it starts as early as in their 30s, and it starts to decrease. And you'll see a woman come in and she'll be like, I just can't stay asleep. I'm waking up in the middle of the night, you know, and that for me is a sign of, okay, her progesterone is getting low.
Okay.
Women will say, you know, I just don't handle stress the way I used to. something that I was able to handle like this, now I just can't handle properly.
Yes.
And that's because their progesterone is running out. Yeah. Estrogen usually follows for us women, and like I said, in menopause, we lose it all, so no more estrogen. And estrogen is like a natural antidepressant. It helps us with mood, makes us happy, so we run out of that as well. So yes, hormones linked to mental health, absolutely.
And I mean, when you're saying that we lose our hormones, and I'm sure women watching, you probably know this, but I honestly when I learned this from you, I was like, you mean we make no more estrogen, no more progesterone, no more testosterone after menopause?
Yes.
So this is why in your work, hormone replacement therapy is so powerful, because it helps women to live 40 plus years feeling good, as opposed to, because you explained to me that in history we would die at 50 years old. So if we didn't have our hormones for 5 or 10 years, like, that's not a big deal. Yeah. But oh my gosh, women are walking around without all of these hormones. So is the only way that we can boost those hormones through hormone replacement therapy?
After a certain point, yes. At the beginning, though, in perimenopause, so the time before menopause, when our hormones are starting to go down, diet, exercise, right, lifestyle can play a huge role, absolutely. Some people will use herbs as well to boost some of their hormones, and they work very well for perimenopause. After menopause, unfortunately, though, you're out. There is one estrogen we still make after menopause. It's called estrone, but you don't get the benefits of estrone. We actually consider the bad estrogen, to be honest with you. So there's no mood benefits from estrone. So
So when it comes to mental health, the hormones that are really associated with that are cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
Yeah.
So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
Yeah, and then DHEA is another one. DHEA is another hormone secreted by your adrenal glands, and it goes down with age as well. Helps us with energy and with mood. Yeah, that one we ran out of as well, unfortunately.
So we run out of this, just all men and women, as we age.
Men's testosterone will go down. They don't run out of it completely, though. Like us, when you test a woman's hormones, it'll say 0 testosterone after a certain age. Men will be low, and it's so important, testosterone for men as well, though. Testosterone gives men not just, mood-wise, but gives them the confidence, the strength, that kind of stuff. Helps them with heart disease, all those different issues. So.
And testosterone in women, is this responsible for our libido?
It is, yeah. So, sex drive will go down, absolutely. But testosterone gives us women as well confidence, helps us with muscle mass, right? So, women will come in, they're like, my diet is great, I'm exercising well, but I can't build up muscles. I've gained 10 pounds in the last 5 years. I don't understand. It's because, their hormones are gone.
Oh my gosh, Tanya, you have given us all stuff to talk about. Okay, after the break, Tanya will help us understand the biochemical causes of anxiety and depression, and what we can do about our symptoms once we know more. Back in a moment. All right, well, if you're just joining us, I've got naturopathic Dr. Tanya Manikkam with us to explain the role of our hormones and with our mental health. So let's keep going. You were really talking about how depression and anxiety, how our hormones, the hormones that are affected, keep going on that train of thought.
Yeah, so there's a lot of hormones that can affect absolutely depression, anxiety. One of them, especially for anxiety, is cortisol, right? So cortisol is a hormone. It's secreted by your adrenal glands. We call it our stress hormone. So for all of us, cortisol is going to be high in the morning, gets us out of bed, gets us going, and then it slowly goes down throughout the day. If somebody has a lot of stress, cortisol will be extremely high all day long. They'll have heart palpitations. They'll feel in that fight or flight. They might get panic attacks if it's too high. If it's too high for too long, eventually it crashes and it gets too low. That's when people get burnouts. So they have to take time off work, can't get out of bed in the morning, that kind of stuff. And then you get more of a depression picture.
Wow.
Another hormone to investigate too, if you are experiencing anxiety or depression, is the thyroid. So your thyroid glands in your neck, right, gives out a couple of hormones called thyroid hormones. hormones. You're able to measure 2 of them, T3 and T4. And to be honest, it's not actually routinely done. So if you want to actually measure those hormones, you have to ask for them. Because normally we test a hormone that your brain sends your thyroid to work, not the actual thyroid hormone.
And now you're a naturopathic doctor, but can we ask our MD to test our thyroid?
Absolutely, yeah. And blood work, all this blood work that I've mentioned, all these hormones are covered by HOOP. So you can just go to your doctor and ask if they're on board for it. And then if they are, then fantastic. And then you can investigate yourself for sure.
Amazing. Okay, so keep going. So other hormones that affect our mental health.
Yeah, so there's the whole hormone picture, like I mentioned. DHEA is one we kind of touch. It's by the adrenal glands as well.
Okay, so these are the glands that sit on top of our kidneys.
Yes, they do.
And this is the fight or flight.
Yes.
And what if you were describing somebody that, you know, is getting panic attacks and getting all of that, but what if you're just somebody who's sort of, you know, leading a regular life, you've got kids, you've got a family, you've got meals to put on the table, busy job, like, but you're not having panic attacks, but you are living with stress a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Does that show? How does that show up in testing?
I tell people even like good stress is still stress, right? And I try to remind that to people because I'll talk about the adrenal glands and stuff, we'll do the testing and they'll be like, oh, I'm not stressed when I take their intake. But then I look at their adrenal glands, I'm like, your cortisol's through the roof. And I tell people, I'm like, what do you do to relax? And a lot of people have no idea what they do to relax. They'll say, I sit and watch TV, but I'm like, do you take a hot bath? Do you read books? Do you do meditation, yoga? And a lot of people don't, and they're like, no, but I can handle the stress, but your body will feel it. Now, if you have a lot of stress, you're going to want to make more of that cortisol, and you're actually going to steal your other hormones to make it.
Okay, this was what was fascinating to me when I came into the clinic.
Yeah.
So explain that again. Hormones steal from other hormones.
Oh yeah. So if you need to make more of one hormone, so basically, like say for cortisol.
Yeah. So I'm super stressed, and I don't even know that I'm super stressed.
Yeah.
And my body is going to steal
your progesterone. Usually it starts with progesterone. It steals progesterone and makes cortisol. So then you're not sleeping well. That kind of stuff. It'll steal your testosterone and make cortisol. So then sex drive goes down. For men, when I see men with low testosterone, which is happening so often. You know, if you look at their cortisol levels, you ask them about the stress levels and stuff, it's extremely high because they need that cortisol, right? So the testosterone gets low.
So it's like the cortisol is already high because we're overproducing cortisol because we're stressed.
But you need to produce it, so your body's going to find a way to make it.
Yeah, so then we produce even more, and then we're also lowering our other hormones that we need to help us to feel good.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, the body is such an incredible thing.
Oh, it's so complicated.
It
yeah,
really
it's so
is.
Complicated.
It's amazing. Okay, so keep sharing about mental health. How can we just keep going?
So for me, if somebody comes in with they've been either diagnosed with mental health disorder or they suspect they have a mental health disorder, for me it's all about trying to find a biochemical cause, right? So do some testing, find out, okay, is it hormones, certain vitamin deficiency, iron deficiency, magnesium deficiency, that can all lead, has been shown in studies, to lead to depression, right? So I'm all about biochemistry testing. Test your inflammation, that kind of stuff. Just find if there's a biochemical cause to why you feel the way you feel.
Oh my gosh, I think so many people have no clue how much work their hormones are doing and how they affect how we're feeling.
Yeah.
So we've talked about cortisol being that stress hormone, that one that, and you're suggesting, so relaxation, take baths, all of that, that's what's really important. What other tips do you have for us to lower that cortisol naturally so that it's also not stealing from our other hormones?
Well, I mentioned magnesium. Magnesium's really good at lowering cortisol as well.
Okay.
And there's herbs you can do. So there's herbs like ashwagandha, all those kinds of things that are herbs that are known for the adrenal glands, and they're fantastic too. But I always tell my patients, I'm like, that's a Band-Aid for me. You know, your lifestyle is the reason your cortisol is, you know, imbalanced, right?
So the ashwagandha, which is a great supplement I love using in my smoothie every day, that's not going to make the difference. It's really the yoga,
it's going to protect your adrenal glands in the meantime, protect your cortisol levels, but it's all about the lifestyle, right? I tell my patients, I'm like, if you did yoga twice a week, I wouldn't have to give you the supplement, right? So,
Wow, we've really got to take our health into our own hands, don't we?
And then for hormones and menopause, for estrogen and progesterone, I prescribe bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. So that's when you're actually giving a woman estrogen, progesterone. For men, testosterone from their medical doctors, usually they'll get that. But for me, it's important to test. You see so many women and men, they just take hormones without testing. So how do you know if you're getting enough? How do you know if you're not getting too much, right? It's all about balancing. So I actually test my patients every 3 to 4 months. I test their hormones and we adjust them accordingly.
Every 3 to 4 months for the length of time that they come and see, like for the rest of their
For as long as they choose to take hormones, absolutely, yeah.
So there is a lot of controversy around hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so that all started with a big study with tens of thousands of women. It was called the Women's Health Initiative. So they were studying just women's health in general because there's so little actually studies towards women's health. They're going to get better, but not. And what they found is they were giving women hormone replacement therapy, and they had an increased risk of heart disease and a small increased risk of breast cancer. Now, this study, the problem was they were giving women synthetic hormones, first of all. So it wasn't bioidentical hormones, meaning it wasn't hormones that mimicked the human body. So when you give a synthetic hormones to start with, you can't actually measure it, right? So you can't test to see if you're taking too much or not. The women that were getting the synthetic estrogen had a higher risk of heart disease, and the women getting the progestin, which is a synthetic progesterone, were at increased risk of breast cancer, actually. Now, now we prescribe bioidentical hormones. So hormones actually mimic the woman's body, the human body. So with those, so far, there's no risk associated as far as heart disease and breast cancer. Unfortunately, though, they are newer on the market. So the studies right now are more for about like 5 years kind of thing. So people always ask me, how long do I stay on hormones? I tell them like, well, right now the studies show that a 5-year length is actually okay. There's no risk, you know? So they're going to keep going with these studies. So eventually we'll have the longer studies. But for sure, the side effects that were shown with the Women's Health Initiatives are right now not associated with the bioidentical hormones.
And so what are they made from? How are they made?
Yeah, so bioidentical hormones they're actually made from plants. But they are brought into the lab and they are manipulated so they mimic the human body. So I tell my patients, I'm like, it's not just you're not taking a plant right now. It's an actual hormone, right?
Yeah.
The synthetic one, the estrogen actually came from horses. So horse urine. So that was the estrogen we were giving women back then.
And we're not doing that anymore.
They're still available to be prescribed, but it's not used as much now, no.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So if we want to get our hormones tested, we want to get all of this workup done, we either come to you, we see a naturopathic doctor, or we can go and see our medical doctor.
Absolutely.
And they can do it under OHIP here in Ontario.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's
and you know,
awesome.
so when it comes to hormones, there is that educational piece, right? So you do want to hopefully see somebody because even myself in just my school, I didn't learn that much. It was all after, you know, that I went and just studied more about it and stuff and took courses. But as far as the testing goes, yeah, you can see any medical professional for it. Absolutely.
That's fantastic. I love that it's available for people because I really think that more of us need to be on board and understand what's going on with our hormones. So I was lucky enough to come to Nutrichem and have my hormones tested. I had the BCB test done, which is the body chemistry balancing test. And I really felt like I'm a healthy woman, that I take care of my health. I really, I prioritize it. I meditate, I do yoga, and yet we found that I am high in cortisol, that my cortisol is high. Yeah. And so,
because even good stress will cause high cortisol, right? You're a busy woman. You're a go kind of person, and that will increase your cortisol levels. Absolutely. And that's why it's good to test you. Like, I'm a big fan of preventive medicine, right? Just test it out. Look at your blood sugar, your cholesterol, all that stuff, your hormones. Where are you at right now, right? Before waiting until something happens and then testing. For me, I find, well, it'll be easier to prevent than to manage or fix the problem once it's here.
Totally. And that's exactly how I felt. I really felt during our experience together that I was just really taking my health into my hands and going inside, because I can feel really well. I can feel like I'm running my life well and that things are going well, but to find that I was high in cortisol and that it was likely that my progesterone was being stolen, because we also noticed that my progesterone,
one of those.
I'm one of those. But you also said, you know, that also could be going into perimenopause. was. And so you put me on a few new things. So let's talk about this.
So we put you on a B complex,
Yeah.
right? So the B vitamins are really important for the adrenal glands. Anybody who has chronic stress, right, whether good or bad, it can be beneficial.
Okay.
We tested your B12.
Yes.
And for me, again, it's not about, when we test a person's vitamin, it's not about being sufficient, you know, just making that mark. It's about being optimal.
Yes, I love that you said, I don't want you to just be sufficient. I want you to be optimal. I was like, yes, I like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's why we added a B complex for you. There's different types of B vitamins out there. Some people, we had this discussion, but some people have a hard time activating their B vitamins. So when you take a B vitamins, whether from food or supplement, your body activates it so you can utilize it. Some people genetically can't do that. So there's different types of B complexes out there too. So if you can find out if you're one of those people, then we can prescribe the right B vitamin as well, right?
And you suggested that I go on to 23andme, so the number 23andme.com, and I can get my DNA tested.
Yeah. So genetic testing exactly can tell us a bit more as well, right? So it can tell you if you're at risk of certain stuff genetically. Some people tell me, you know, I don't want to know. And other people, though, I'm like my entire family, we did the genetic testing because I'm like, I want to know because there's so many things you can do to prevent stuff, right? So I'd like to know. When it comes to the B vitamins, if you are one of those people that can utilize it, to really know, it's through genetic testing. It's called the MTHFR gene. The reason I recommended that one for you is because with the 23andMe, you can actually download your raw genetic data. Because 23andMe, they're going to give you a report of your ancestry and stuff, which is all fun. But I want to see the medical side, right? So you can download your raw genetic data and then from there find out what genes you have.
But you're saying anyone that's under a lot of stress should be really looking into their B vitamins. They should be supplementing with some B vitamins.
Most of the time, yeah.
All right, what else did you give me? So this was interesting because, again, I feel like I'm a happy person and I feel like things are going well for me, but my dopamine was really low.
Yeah.
And that's a genetic thing. So anyone in my family, if you're watching, we need to be tested for our dopamine. And my father suffered with depression for many years. So the test you did, the biochemistry test, tests even beyond hormones and everything. So you had your neurotransmitters tested, right? And so dopamine was low, and tyrosine's a building block of dopamine. So to boost your dopamine, then we just give you more tyrosine so your body can make more dopamine. Dopamine makes you happy, but we've noticed, so the research shows that people with low dopamine are more at risk of having addictions, depression, those kinds of things. So that makes so much sense in my experience.
In your family,
It shouldn't have surprised me, but it was amazing because, like I said, I feel like I'm somebody who's optimistic and I'm hopeful and I'm happy, and yet we noticed that was very low. So that is exciting. I can't wait to report back and let you all know at home how I'm doing. And then what about this one, Mega Mag?
So that's magnesium glycinate. So magnesium helps lower cortisol. It's also fantastic for mood as well. And it's good for hormones, actually. So it really helps turn our estrogens, because you can actually take your hormones like your estrogen and turn them a lot into the bad estrogens, which we don't want because they can convert in all kinds of stuff, right? So magnesium actually prevents that conversion to the bad. So.
And I was really interested when I met with you, you said you were talking about the different kinds of magnesium. I mean, magnesium sulfate and Epsom salts are really nice for a nice bath and for your muscles.
For muscles,
but, and maybe a bit of helping you to sleep a bit, but not really, right?
Like, so magnesium, I'm always asking people when they come in, because they'll tell me they take magnesium, like which type. So magnesium oxide, fantastic for constipation. So if you're constipated, go for it. Magnesium citrate, sure, great for bones. Magnesium glycinate's really good for mood, though, and hormones. So.
Just amazing. I wish I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much for being here, Tanya. Oh my gosh, you shared all about how our hormones affect our health physically, emotionally, and mentally. Thank you again. When we come back, I'll share my final thoughts. Back in a moment. My father suffered with clinical depression for over a decade before he died. It was debilitating at times, and as a family, we were often left wondering what, if anything, could be done to help this precious man who was so obviously in pain. It was scary, for him for sure, but also for us. as we watched this familiar man turn into someone we didn't recognize at times. We felt helpless, and he felt hopeless, a combination that did nothing to help him heal. Why is it that when we break an arm or a leg, we immediately know what needs to be done? We go to the doctor, we get x-rays and a cast put on. Our friends sympathize with us, signing cute notes wishing us well. But when our brains suffer an injury in the form of mental illness, we run scared, or worse, we say and do nothing, leaving our friends and loved ones to feel marginalized even more than they already do when they are in such a dark place. If you are struggling, or if you sense a loved one needs help, please reach out. Don't stay silent. To use Gandhi's words, we must be the change we wish to see in the world. And I want to continue to open up the dialogue around mental health and mental illness, which I now understand better thanks to my guests Elizabeth Eacrett and Tanya Manikkam. And I want to thank you for being here as we explore topics that don't always come easily, but that are more important if we want to live our best lives and help others to do the same. Until next time, I want you to remember one thing, that no matter where you are, and no matter how it feels, you are never, ever alone. See you next time.